Hi, everybody. Just welcome to another class of organizational communication, right? Now, today I will be speaking on the topic of the human resource approach. Now, you know that we have covered many different types of approaches, starting from the classical approaches to the system approach that we have covered, critical approach that we have covered. And then now today, I just want to look into the human resource approach with all of you, all right, to really understand where human resource approach is being used and implemented in the case of organizational communication as well, you know. So bear with me as I explain the human resource approach, what it takes. Now, some of the things that will be mentioned is probably familiar to you because it's sort of overlap with some of the other things that we have learned previously, all right? So bear with me while I talk about that, all right? Now, let's move on. Now, what is the human resource approach? Now, if you remember how we look into this classical approach, right? Basically, the take of classical approach is that organizations are like a machine, right? We basically treat people like a tool or a part of a machine where in classical approach, they basically see human as someone emotionless and someone who works for money. And yeah, you know, as long as there is some money, people do their work, you know, and those were the times, as I mentioned before, you know, because it was during the industrial revolution, many of the time, what they do is actually in classical approach, they actually have people doing specialization where, you know, you keep doing the same thing again and again, again and again. And there is a process of standardization where there's a group of people who will be doing the same thing, right? So 10 of you will be placing the ball into a bag, you know, another 10% will be sealing the bag, and another person will be packing the bag into another bag. Another 10% will be the one selling it out and bringing it out to the outside world, you know. So there was a standardization, which means that back then, just like any other machine, humans are always seen to be easily replaceable. And of course, this approach works very well when you're trying to do something that's routinal, right? You're trying to do something routinal. Like I mentioned, like when you are working in a factory, every single day you are doing the same thing. Everything is predictable. So therefore, every single day, what you need to do is just repeat the same old process. And at the end of the day, you want predictability, and you want to ensure that people actually just do the same thing every day consistently. And eventually, if there is any problem, it's very easy for you to detect where the problem comes from because the process is the same every day, right? Now, that was the classical approach that we have learned. We have also learned human relations approach, right? Where human relations approach basically try to see that, you know, humans are not just like a machine. Humans have needs, they have their desire, and sometimes it's not just monetary that can satisfy a worker. Now, the combination of classical approach and this human relations approach is what we call the human resources approach. So remember that classical approach plus the human relations approach equals to human resource approach, right? Now, what is the human resource approach? Human resource approach, basically, if you were to look into the definition, right, it recognizes that, okay, well, everybody has a feeling that is very important. We need to take care of individuals feeling inside a company, but we also need to look at balancing it with their work. So in other words, human resource approach is one that starts to feel that, you know, we don't need to be like completely neglecting people's feeling, but yet we also cannot completely neglect work, you know. So human resource approach is one that tries to find the balance between wanting you to get your work done, but yet at the same time also recognizes that you have feelings and emotions that needs to be taken care of. So it is a more balanced sort of approach. Now, like I say, I think we are pretty familiar with this approach. Reason being because we have mentioned the Blake and Moulton managerial grid before, right? Where we talk about the balance between the work and people. Like, are you a work person or are you a people person? So Blake and Moulton managerial grid is actually stemming from the human resource approach. Now, you will recall that inside the Blake and Moulton managerial grid is where we have over here, right? As you can see in the chart, concern for people on one side, and then at the bottom, what we do have is concern for production. So are you a person or a leader who only cares about the work, or do you care a lot about the people? Now, if you were to look at it, if it was a 1-9, 1-9, right? That means you do not care so much about the productivity, but you care too much about people. That's called a country club management. You only take care of people's feeling. Of course, if you look at 1-1, 1-1 is what you call the impoverished management. It means you are neither caring about the people, neither do you do well in the work. 1-1. Now, 9-1, we mentioned a lot in class about authoritarian leadership style, right? Now, authoritarian leadership style often comes up to authority compliances management, where the authority is always about working and finishing the task at hand. And they don't really care about how a person feels, but it's most that you are trying to just get things done, right? That is authority compliances management. We have 5 of what we call the middle of the road management. Well, they are halfway through productivity. They are also halfway through the they are concerned for people. So they kind of like, they are a moderate kind of leader. But of course, everybody works for 9-9, where you care for the people, but yet at the same time, you are also caring about the work and trying to be as productive as possible. That's called a 9-9. So Blake and Moulton managerial grid is one thing that we have mentioned before, and I think we are all pretty familiar with it, right? Another one that falls under the human resource tier approach is also the Likert system 4, right? Where in every company, for them, your company can be made up of either one of these systems, where either you are an exploitative, exploitative, authoritative organization where everything is controlled by the main boss. You know, the main boss says it all. System 2 is when benevolent, authoritative organization where, well, your boss makes all the decisions, but they do listen to you as well. System 3, consultative organizations, is that when your boss tend to consult people or their subordinates in order to make a decision. And of course, system 4 is participative organizations where the boss doesn't make his decision by himself, but that he makes the decision with everybody. Again, like a system 4 falls under the theories of human approach. Now, again, like I said, we are pretty familiar with those. There are also another one, what you call the Auchi's theory Z, where basically we are trying to look at Japanese organizations and also the US organizations. Now, when we were talking about this, right, you will notice that this theory, again, is probably very much utilized in many, many different aspects. For example, in the aspect of media management, you know, even when you're managing a media companies, this theory is one that has been used over and over again. What kind of approach do you use as a leader? Do you go by the Japanese management or do you go by the US management? Now, the Auchi's theory Z, he says that if you were to look carefully at Japanese organizations and US organizations, and mind you, this theory was done way back in 1980s, you know, and it has been proven over the years, since 1980s all the way to 2021. Even though, you know, globalizations are happening, even though the world are getting more and more modern, yet this theory still holds true in many sense, where people say, generally you can see even multinational companies, they are either going by the Japanese management or the US management style. Now, Japanese organizations or Japanese management style, according to this particular theory, is that they adopt a mindset. The company adopts a mindset of, when I employ you for a lifetime, not planning to change you, not planning to fire you, not planning to keep you anywhere. It's always a lifetime employment. And because they are planning to hire you for a lifetime, they tend not to evaluate your performance as often as the US organization. So, they evaluate you possibly maybe once in every 10 years. But promotion, however, is also very slow in a Japanese organization. It is a very non-specialized career path because, I'm expecting you to work in my company for the rest of your life. So the thing is, when I'm expecting you to work with me for the rest of your life, I expect you to know how to do every single thing in the company, right? So you will move from department A to department B to department C to D to E to F. So you're learning everything that happens in the whole company. And they tend not to control the staff as much. And when they try to make decisions, they make it collectively as a group. And if there's anything that happens, they take it as a collective responsibility. And when they are having any concerns or care, they look at it as the fuller and the bigger picture. That is Japanese management. Whereas US organizations are known to have short-term employment, I'm going to hire you. So, the idea of hiring a contract worker, the idea of having you on probation for 6 months, these are all ideas that come up from US organizations where your employment is known to be short-term, I want you to come in, you got to pick up ASAP. Now, if you're good, you get rapid evaluation and you get rapid promotion. And US companies, they oftentimes hire you expecting you to be a specialist in a certain area, they expect you to really be an expert where you just hold you hold on to one same expertise, and you are able to be a specialized be a specialist in that sense. Now, US culture has tendency to be more individualistic, so therefore the control mechanism oftentimes are more explicit, and they emphasize more on individuals' decision making and individual responsibility. So if there's anything, you should be the individual who is responsible for things that is happening. And also, of course, when they were to be looking at any concern, they look at concern of one specific department, one specific individual. It's very segmented the way they look at issues and things. Now, of course, the question is, if you are working for any organization, which method do you prefer? Because this style of management, according to Theory Z, it influences the culture, it influences the satisfaction of the employee, and it influences how you work generally, Now, because the Japanese management, like I said, they expect you to actually be working for them for a lifelong, they use a lot of interpersonal communication. So they kind of like treat you as a family. So, okay, now we are all a family. You're going to be here for a lifetime. And, when there's any opportunity for promotion, it always promotes the people who are inside. And they oftentimes emphasize on seniority as well, So back then, the mandatory retirement age was at 55 years old. Now, of course, even people in Japan works in a much older age, yet the mandatory retirement age was at 55. So therefore, they kind of expect that, okay, when you come in at 30 years old or 25 years old, for the next 30 years, you're going to be with us, But they do use a lot of part-time staff, especially women, because women has to be, be the mother, be the caretaker at home. And more often than not, during the time, the part-time staff are usually made up of women in order to give them more flexibility to be at home. Again, this is not my personal opinion. This is just how the way things are. Okay. Now, there was always a high regards and loyalty among the employer and employee. If you look at Japanese management, they oftentimes feel like, their boss are superior, they respect their boss, and they have high sense of loyalty towards their boss. Now, and like I mentioned, they make decision makings in a collective manner. That means they make decisions together rather than individually. Your boss says what you do, what no, they tend to discuss and come to a consensus, which they even have a term for it called nemawashi, to emphasize on this point that they actually come up with results using consensus. Now, because of this way of Japanese management, it's been said that this style of management often produces very good HR managers because it's more interpersonal. They care about people. They are more intimate in that sense, and they are very closely knitted, right? But of course, that is based on cultural and the way how you interact as well. And because you are oftentimes working in the same company for a long, long time, you always have the adaptation of advanced technology way. You become more, more adapt to a lot of different kinds of technology because you are stuck in the same place and you see the evolution of the place. But then, of course, like I mentioned, it actually gives the employee a high commitment and sense of loyalty. Even though, their performance evaluation is probably once every 10 years. That's why people in Japan, they tend to work to death because they respect their boss so much that they do not want to go against their boss, and they will do whatever. So, but at the end of the day, this is again, there's good and there's bad. And there's always this sense of collective responsibility that everybody comes together. And of course, it works for them because most of their main shareholders are banks and insurance company and not so much of individuals, right? And in companies like that is when you will see that training and development is always given by trainings and development is always given continuously because they want you to be an expert at every single thing, right? Because they want you to be an all-rounder. Now, and they oftentimes see their leaders as the father figure of what you call the kacho, because they often feel like, my leader is the one who is way high up there, But the benefits for, and the workers are often very good because remember, they expect you to work for them for a lifetime. So they will give you housing loan, they will give you scholarship for your children to study. And they don't often have like so hierarchical where there's so many layers of organizational structure. It's often very simple, very flexible structure because everybody does everything. So there's no need for a real strong structure in that sense, Now, American management, on the other hand, their success is often their focus to be able to go international. They are oftentimes, focus is like, okay, we need to go out there. We need to conquer and share things which are outside. Bring our technology to outside. That's always the American management style, where their main purpose is that, okay, I want to protect my local market. I want to make sure that my people use my own things, but I also want to make sure that foreign market are also using my things. But Americans oftentimes do not have raw materials, which means they oftentimes take raw materials from countries like China or Southeast Asia countries, and they are oftentimes try to source cheap labor from outside because the labors between America is expensive. And of course, they want to diversify their market. And so therefore, they oftentimes aims to operate in a more stable country. Whenever they see opportunity to go outside there, they will go. And of course, they transfer their technology to that country that they need to go. Therefore, you see a lot of multinational corporations that stems from the American company, especially those who are export and imports of products and services, foreign subsidiary, joint ventures, franchises, McDonald's and all of that, and even microelectronic stuff. The American management tends to really focus on becoming a more multinational company. Now, you have what you call the sender and the host in terms of the American management. Now, the host country is oftentimes what we call the transfer of technology, capital, expertise, okay, from the US themselves, right? So basically, what happens is that the host country, which means American themselves, they get to transfer their technology, capital, and expertise to outside. They are also giving job opportunity for their own people. They make their own country becoming very competitive, and they become a provider of products within their country. And they actually get more revenue for their country, which is why US is so wealthy and rich, right, to begin with. Now, what is the advantage of letting the US companies come into your country? So there are advantage for the sender, which is job opportunities, right? And also profits from given by the companies. And you are also receiving the technology from these countries, right? You get more advanced materials and more advanced equipments. And of course, you become the stable provider for raw material. You are able to provide cheap labor. And of course, by you understanding their product, it also gives us you more time to plan for local product. Now, if you, after all that I have said, if you were to compare the US and the Japanese management, you will realize that there are pros and cons to both, right? Well, whereas one is more a lifelong job, you do everything, and you make group decisions, whereas US is really about competing short-term, and everything is about individuals, and really it's about the work and productivity. When you were to compare these two, there's always an advantage and disadvantages. And from this Theory Z, they actually came out with quality control systems, which are very different both in Japan. In Japan, we call it the PDCA model, whereas in US, we have the SEAP or the SEP model. Okay, so in Japan, they plan, do, check, and action. Now in US, they start with standard, then they evaluate you, then they take action, and then they plan. So you see how the steps are actually very different in terms of quality control as well. Again, this stems from the what we have learned about the Theory Z. Now, having seen all this, right, we now know that we have covered the building blocks, starting from classical to human relations, which end up with human resource approach, which brings us to Black Mountain managerial, Likert System 4, and Ortiz Theory Z. These are the human resource approaches, right? I hope that has been helpful for all of you. And you will see even inside the slides that I've given you the references for you as well, if you would like to read up more on these particular theories under the human relations approach. All right. So thank you very much, guys. This is a short 20 minutes lectures, and I hope that it will be helpful to kickstart you should you need to use these concepts within your work as well. So thank you, and I will see you guys.